Now, if we're God's children, and if we're part of His thing, this one's not going to sound very much fun, then we are going to get disciplined. As God's kids, we're going to get disciplined so that we'll continue to grow. Hebrews 12:5-6 say this, and have you completely forgotten the word of encouragement, he does say it is encouraging, that addresses you as a father addresses his son. It says, my son, do not make light of the Lord's discipline, and do not lose heart when he rebukes you, because the Lord disciplines the ones he loves, and he chastens everyone he accepts as a son. And so we get disciplined. What loving parent doesn't discipline their child? In fact, if you ever come across a child who's not been disciplined, and I'm not talking about the whooping side of things, I'm talking about someone who's not been disciplined. Do you know what it does to me? Once I realize that, it grieves my heart. Because nobody has come into this kid's life or person's life and told them their hurting relationship. That by what they're saying, what they're doing, and how they're living, they're hurting relationship with their friends, they're hurting relationship with their brothers and sisters, they're hurting relationship with their teacher, they're hurting relationship with their parents, they're hurting relationship, and they're the ones who are suffering the most. See, Hebrews reminds us in verse 11, no discipline seems pleasant at the time. Painful. Nobody says, woo, discipline. Looking forward to it. Take me behind the woodshed with the 2x4, God, right between my eyes. That's what I'm looking for this week. Nobody likes that. Nobody looks for that. Later on, though, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who've been trained by it. See, it's incredibly beneficial, incredibly helpful. And when those times in our lives come that we say, God, do what you need to do so that I can become more and more like your son. We also have some relational responsibilities with our siblings, but I'm not going to talk about that much more than just mention that that's what Jim's going to talk about next week as it relates to one another. So there are some responsibilities, some opportunities as children of God, but there's also some great privileges that remind us of our position in Christ, our justification, righteousness, our cleanliness. As children of God, you and I are heirs of God. We are co-heirs with Christ. Let that sink in for just a second. With all the rights and privileges that come with it. Romans 8:17 says, now if we are children, then we are heirs, heirs of God and co-heirs with Christ. If indeed we share in his sufferings, in order that we also may share in his glory. Think about that for a second. All of the access, the power, the privileges that come from being an heir or co-heir with Christ, we have access to as well. Wow. Who's your daddy? Right? Takes that phrase to a whole other level. If you start thinking about it like, oh my goodness, my dad owns the world. My dad always works for the good. My dad provides peace in the midst of the storm. My dad can beat up your dad. Right?